She was supposed to be helpless. Alone, forgotten. On a mountain road with a storm closing in. But Arthur made one fatal mistake. He thought Clara was still afraid of him. From hidden recordings to offshore accounts. From betrayal to revenge. One pregnant woman is about to turn a billionaire's perfect life into a legal nightmare. In a game of power, secrets, and survival, the hunter is about to become the prey.
Hours ago, we were at Aperture, toasting my husband Leo's latest funding round for his software giant. He was all smiles over dinner. But in the Range Rover, the mask slipped. When he swerved onto a desolate lookout point over the ocean, I understood. "Get out," Leo said, his voice empty, the engine rumbling. "Maybe this will teach you some respect, Amelia." A long, cold walk home in the dark. That was his lesson. He knew there was no cell service here. He had no idea I'd been recording his every word for a year. My brother Evan was parked in a blind spot up the road, waiting for my signal. I turned to Leo, the fine leather of the seats groaning. His jaw was tight with that smug look he got after a big win. A few hours ago, we were celebrating his success. Now he was ditching his pregnant wife on a cliff because I asked about an offshore account statement I found in his desk. "You really doing this?" I asked, aiming my voice at the hidden mic. "Actions have consequences, Amelia. You question my decisions. You snoop in my affairs. You make me look weak. Perhaps this little hike will remind you who is in charge." Tucked in my purse was that account statement. His mistress Clara S.'s name was listed as a beneficiary. The transfer was probably already complete, but I stayed silent. For now. Evan and I had a plan. I had to see it through. "A storm's blowing in from the coast," I said, pointing to the churning gray sky. "Then I suggest you start walking." He snapped back, hands gripping the wheel. "Unless, of course, you want to beg me to forgive you and admit you were out of line. If you believe no one should be treated this way, please subscribe. It's free, and it allows us to tell more stories that matter." A year ago, I would have pleaded with him to let me back in the car. I actually thought we could fix our broken marriage. That was before I found his divorce strategy folder on our shared cloud. Before I learned about the shell corporations and trusts set up to leave me with nothing. The moment I started asking questions, he became cruel. This was his move to break me, but it was about to become his ruin. "I am getting out," I said, and I shoved the heavy door open. "Good. The cold air might do you some good." I stepped onto the wet gravel. It was just a turnout with a cheap guardrail protecting a steep drop to the ocean. Leo picked this spot for its brutal isolation. He even pointed it out last month. "Imagine getting stranded out here," he'd laughed. That S when I knew he was capable of anything. The Range Rover S engine hummed beside me. His phone screen lit up, probably a text to Clara telling her it was done. He revved the engine, spraying me with mud and dirt, and then vanished into the fog. I stood there for a full minute, watching the red taillights disappear. Then I walked to the cluster of pine trees where Evan's old pickup truck was hidden. My brother stepped out, holding a thick blanket and a thermos of hot tea. "You get it all?" he asked. Every single word. I held up my phone and pressed stop on the recording. He told me to go learn some respect. Evan just shook his head, his face a mask of fury. "I've seen him wear you down for years, Amelia, but this," he motioned towards the empty dark road. "This is criminal. Ms. Davies is going to destroy him with this recording." I took the tea, letting the warmth soak into my numb fingers. The fog had turned into a cold, driving rain. By morning, Leo would imagine me lost on the cliffs, broken and desperate. He'd be waiting for my tearful, apologetic phone call. "Is our forensics guy ready?" I asked. "He has been on standby all week. The second that wire transfer went through, he was on it. The trace goes back 2 years. Leo has been laundering company money into untraceable accounts, getting ready to file for divorce and leave you penniless. And Ms. Davies is filing the injunction first thing in the morning. Reckless endangerment, wire fraud, psychological abuse. She says this tape plus the financial trail has him completely trapped." We climbed into Evan S. truck just as the storm truly broke, rain hammering the windshield. I could picture Leo driving home, feeling victorious, probably pouring himself an expensive whiskey to celebrate his power play. He didn't know that the moment he started hiding money, I started building my own team. Evan had installed micro cameras in our smart loft, hidden inside the speakers. Our accountant, a specialist in tech sector fraud, was tracking every single transaction, and Ms. Davies, the most feared divorce attorney in the state, had already prepared a case that was an entire terabyte of data. "The Loft S audio just uploaded to the cloud," Evan said, checking his phone. "We have footage of him bringing Clara there last Tuesday when you were visiting your parents. They were in your home studio." A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. The pain had faded months ago. This was about justice. "He's been engineering this for years," I said. "Isolating me from friends, controlling every dollar, the endless mind games it. A classic narcissist playbook." Mrs. Davies did mention that judges really don't like it when tech billionaires abandon their pregnant wives on a dark road as a power trip. Evan drove through the downpour with ease, using back roads so we wouldn't be seen. He'd rehearsed the entire route. Nothing was being left to chance. The hotel was booked under my mother's maiden name, paid for with cash. Evan had been withdrawing for weeks. My escape bag was already in the room with encrypted drives containing all of our evidence. He'll start to worry when you don't come home. Begging, Evan said. I'm counting on it, I replied. The hotel security cameras will see me check in alone, soaking wet and hysterical. The front desk clerk will note that I was too distraught to even speak properly. Miss Davies had coached me on how to play the part perfectly. The rain got heavier as we neared the city. Leo was probably home now, texting Clara about how he finally put his wife in her place. In the morning, he'll expect to find me on his doorstep, defeated and begging for forgiveness. Instead, he is going to find his assets frozen and a summons from the SEC about his creative accounting. You sure you're ready for this? Evan asked as the motel sign glowed ahead. I thought about the woman I was before Leo spent the last 5 years dismantling my confidence. I could still hear his voice on the recording, telling me to enjoy my walk. I thought about Clara's new apartment, the hidden accounts, and the coercive prenup he'd made me sign that basically erased me. I've been ready for a year, I said. He just handed me the final piece of evidence we needed to completely ruin him. Evan pulled around to the back of the motel. I took the small overnight bag, just enough to look like I'd fled in a panic, and stepped out into the pouring rain. It was time to become the victim, the terrified, abandoned wife. Tomorrow, Leo would finally learn who held all the power. The lobby felt painfully bright after the dark highway. A puddle formed at my feet as I walked to the counter, making sure my whole body was trembling. The night clerk, a woman with kind eyes, saw me and rushed over with a stack of towels. Oh my goodness, are you all right? She asked, wrapping one around my shoulders. My husband, I managed to say, letting my voice crack and shatter. He left me on the side of the road. Out on the coastal highway. He drove away. Her expression shifted from concern to pure outrage. Perfect. This would all go in the nightly report, exactly as Miss Davies planned. The woman found me a chair and brought hot tea while she checked me in. I used my original name, Amelia Cole, and paid with a separate credit card Leo never knew existed. Room 312 was plain, clean, and overlooked the rain-slicked parking lot. I bolted the door, slid the chain across, and let out a long, slow breath. I took out the burner phone Evan had given me and replayed the recording. Leo's voice, full of cold contempt, echoed in the room. You think you so clever, don't you? Questioning my business partners, asking about company finances, like you have any idea what you're talking about. Then my own voice, steady and calm. It's our money, Leo. I have a right to understand our future. He let out a harsh, barking laugh. My money. I make it. You spend it. On art courses and organic groceries. $1,000 on a user experience design course, Amelia. 1,000. I remembered that course. It was for a mobile app to track the baby's health. He had been angry about the course because I was supposed to be running errands for one of his investor dinners. The same dinner where he bragged about spending $50,000 on a watch. The recording went on with one of his usual lectures. You humiliated me last week, Amelia. Correcting my lead developer on his own code in front of the entire team. Who do you think you are? I have a Wharton degree. You used to design websites for dentists. Before you, I was a lead engineer at a major firm. Before I rescued you from that dead-end job, I gave you this life. I shut my eyes, trying to remember the person I was before he convinced me I was nothing. I didn't just design a few user interfaces. I wrote the original source code for his billion-dollar app. But Leo had told his version of our company's founding story so many times, I think he actually believed it. My phone buzzed. It was a text from our private investigator. He found it. A hidden server network in Panama. Leo had been siphoning millions in profits for 2 years. 2 years, I remember when the deception started. The sudden insistence on separate corporate accounts for, as he put it, tax efficiency. The new CFO was one of his fraternity brothers. The stack of papers he told me to sign without reading, saying it was just a formality. Just trust me, Amelia. Another text came in. That one was from Jessica, my lawyer. Judge Albright granted an emergency hearing for 1 p.m. tomorrow. Bring the drive. Judge Albright was a legend, known for absolutely destroying finance sharks with egos like Mark's. She'd overseen 3 brutal high-asset divorces this year, and every wife walked away with everything. Jessica had been waiting for this opening. I changed into clothes from the go-bag I'd packed ages ago, sat down, and started writing. Not for the court, but for me, a list of every single thing Mark tried to steal from my life. I wrote about the gallery space I was set to acquire, which Mark claimed would be too much stress while you're pregnant. The waterfront condo in Sausalito, I found that would have doubled my entire portfolio if I still had one. My partnership with my old mentor, Dead after Mark convinced me he was just some washed-up has-been. My phone lit up. Mark's face. I sent him to voicemail, then hit play on speaker, recording it all on a separate device. Sarah, this is getting ridiculous. It's been hours. You've had your little drama session. Call me, and I'll come pick you up. Don't blow this out of proportion. 10 minutes later, he called again. His voice was ice. I know you found that drive. Stop acting like a child and answer the phone. If you think this little disappearing act is making me lose sleep, you are dead wrong. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home. But I could hear that tiny crack of panic in his voice. He was realizing this wasn't part of his plan. I was supposed to have called by now, crying, begging to be let back in. My silence was shattering his control. At midnight, a blocked number. A gut feeling told me to answer but say nothing. Hello, Sarah? It was Chloe. Her voice was shaking. Mark asked me to call you. He's so worried. He said you had a fight and you're not answering. He wants you to know he's sorry, and he just wants you home safe. Mark had never said sorry in his life. He never admitted fault, not once. The fact that he sent his mistress to deliver a fake apology told me everything I needed to know. He was officially panicked. I hung up without a word. By 1 a.m., the calls were every 15 minutes. Mark, his mother, even his business partner, Julian. I recorded every voicemail, noting the time, number, and the growing desperation. A hysterical pregnant wife was supposed to be needy, not unreachable. I ordered room service on his platinum card. A filet mignon, truffle, mac and cheese, and a sparkling cider. Let the receipt show I was celebrating, not breaking. Let it prove I wasn't having the emotional meltdown Mark was counting on. At 2:30 a.m., a text message made me smile. Not from Mark, but from our neighbor, Mrs. Gable. Saw Mark in your home office with a flashlight, messing around with your safe. Then he tore out of the driveway. Is everything all right, dear? He was hunting for my encrypted backups, not knowing David had moved the originals to a secure vault last week. It was another perfect piece of evidence, proof my escape was planned long before he left me at that charity gala. I opened the curtains and watched the storm hit the city. Somewhere out there, Mark was realizing his perfect little world was coming undone. He thought he'd taught me a lesson. Tomorrow morning, when the markets open and he finds his offshore accounts frozen, when his key card to the firm is declined, and when 2 SEC agents show up asking about securities fraud, he'll finally learn who was teaching whom. The rain hammered the glass. 8 months of planning, of documenting every single transaction, of playing the doting, supportive wife while I built a case that would utterly destroy him. It all led to this perfect storm, he brewed himself. I set an alarm for 7 a.m. I needed to look properly devastated for the hearing. Jessica would be here at noon to prepare, but for now, I just sat in the darkness and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The morning light cut through the blinds at exactly 7. I'd been awake for hours, laptop open, watching our joint brokerage account. The numbers were just as I expected. Mark had already tried moving $200,000 at 6:45 a.m. He was scrambling, trying to hide every asset he could before I could touch them. A little late for that, my love. My team had already flagged everything. By noon, my place was a war room. Nina, my forensic accountant, came first with 2 briefcases of hard drives, her signature red lipstick a little smudged. She laid out the proof on the table: offshore transfers, shell companies, falsified shareholder reports, all perfectly cataloged. The Cayman accounts were officially frozen as of 9 a.m., she said, pointing to a complex chart. Mark tried to access them 3 times just after sunrise. He's probably having a complete meltdown. Jessica arrived next, phone glued to her ear, firing off legal threats. She hung up and gave me a look of grim satisfaction. Judge Albright moved our hearing up. She wants to see this immediately. Also, Mark just hired Franklin Croft. The shark? David asked, walking in with a crate of audio gear. The same attorney who got that hedge fund CEO cleared on all those fraud charges last year. Croft doesn't come cheap. Mark must be liquidating everything he can to afford his retainer. I felt a sudden spike of fear, but Jessica put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Croft is a monster, but he can't argue with encrypted server logs and a crystal-clear money trail. Besides, he's walking into an ambush. We've had months to prepare for this. David plugged his laptop into the hotel TV, and the screen showed a camera feed from our study. I have the highlight reel, if you can call it that. Just brace yourself, Sarah. This part is ugly. The first clip was Mark in his office at 3 a.m. 2 weeks ago. I was upstairs, fast asleep, thanks to the special blend herbal tea he'd insisted I drink. On the screen, Mark was scanning every single document from our fireproof safe, then placing them back perfectly. The files included the original appraisals for my private art collection, my parents' estate plans, and the deed to the beach house my grandmother left me. He was building a digital ghost file, Nina said softly, creating forgeries with tiny, almost undetectable changes. If you hadn't found that encrypted drive, he would have replaced every original with a fake. The next video was somehow even worse. It was Mark and Chloe in our screening room a month ago. A night he told me he was working late with investors. She was wrapped in my favorite cashmere blanket. They were laughing at his phone. "Turn up the sound," I said, my voice strained. Mark's voice filled the room. She actually believed the auditors' meeting was an all-nighter. I've got her so perfectly managed. A few more weeks, the final asset transfer goes through. Then we can finally end this whole charade. Chloe's high-pitched laugh was like glass breaking. And the prenup makes sure she walks away with nothing, right? The prenup is irrelevant. She'll never challenge me. Sarah doesn't have the guts. By the time she even realizes what happened, we'll be in Zurich and she'll be too devastated to even call a lawyer. David paused the video, and the only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the San Francisco Bay. Somewhere down there, Mark was in his high-rise office, wondering why his passwords weren't working, why his private wealth manager wasn't returning his calls, and why his entire world was suddenly on fire. "There's more," David said gently. "Do you want to see it?" I just nodded slowly. The next clip was Mark in our garage, pacing on a call. The timestamp was last Tuesday, while I was at my prenatal yoga class. "Maya has been a lifesaver," he was saying. "She has no clue I'm recording her. Every detail about Sarah's family finances, her father's health issues, this inheritance her grandmother left her. It's a trust worth nearly $5 million, and Sarah has no idea it even exists." My legs felt weak. Maya, my own sister. I had been paying off her loans for years, covering for her with our parents, and she was selling me out to Mark. "When did he first reach out to her?" I whispered. Nina pulled up the phone logs. "The first wire transfer was 14 months ago, with the Coids call starting a year ago, always when you were out of town. He was paying her debts, exchanged secrets." Nina glanced at her watch. "We need to leave for the courthouse in 30 minutes. "Sarah, are you sure you want to see this last part?" Jessica asked, her voice gentle. I turned from the rainy San Francisco skyline. "Show me. I need to see it all." David slid his laptop in front of me. "This is from the encrypted drive you found. We just broke the final password." On screen, I saw emails between Mark and his lawyers dating back over a year. The subject line, "Exit Protocol." It detailed a strategy for our divorce, a plan to make me doubt my own sanity, empty our joint accounts, and use my pregnancy against me until I finally broke. Then, one line made my blood run cold. It was a draft email left open on our shared tablet. "The goal is to gaslight her," it read. "Hide her things, cancel plans and say she forgot. Make Ava question her own sanity. By the time I file, she'll be too broken to fight for her share of the firm." It all clicked: the past year of tiny cruelties. The architectural plans Ethan swore I'd misplaced. The charity gala he insisted I'd forgotten. Car keys moved from the bowl, only to reappear in my gym bag. I'd started a secret journal, worried I was getting early onset dementia. He wasn't just cheating, he was executing a strategy. "This attorney he hired," Sarah said, "he's notorious. He helps wealthy husbands drain accounts and paint their wives as unstable. He's also under investigation for ethics violations," Sarah said, pulling up another document. "And here's the kill shot. The reason we had to file an emergency motion. It was a wire confirmation. The day before, Ethan had moved $7.2 million from our venture fund into a private Cayman account, just before leaving me stranded. He was running," I whispered. The pieces falling into place. This was bigger than just ending our marriage. He was about to be caught for investment fraud. "The bank's fraud department got an anonymous tip about that transfer this morning," Sarah said, a tiny smile playing on her lips. I just stared at her. "That was you, wasn't it?" Sarah gave a slight nod. "We have a professional duty to report a felony financial crime." The whole ugly picture materialized. This was so much bigger than our marriage, so much more than his affair. Ethan was a predator in a bespoke suit. He used our life, our company, as a cover story while he stole from investors and planned his getaway. He wasn't just trying to ruin me. He was about to destroy everyone who'd ever believed in his vision. "Judge Evans has to see all of it," I said, my voice hardening. "Every last email, every transfer, every single lie." Sarah's smile became a sharp grin. I could see why she was the best divorce attorney in Seattle. "Oh, she'll see it," Sarah promised. "And Ethan Sterling is about to discover what it's like to have absolutely nothing." The courthouse felt like a concrete tomb, all granite pillars and echoing halls built to make you feel small. I walked in wearing a dark charcoal suit Ethan had never seen, an outfit I bought for this exact day. Sarah was on my right, my brother Ben on my left. We entered courtroom 3C at 1:45 p.m. Ethan was already there with his lawyer, a man whose expensive suit couldn't hide the sheer panic in his eyes. But Ethan, he just looked empty. The charming venture capitalist was gone, replaced by a guy with a wrinkled shirt and dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. When he saw me, that exhaustion curdled into pure, raw hatred. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Evans swept in, her presence instantly silencing the room. She sat, donned a pair of reading glasses, and peered at the pile of documents before her. "We are here today for an emergency motion filed by Ava Sterling regarding asset seizure and marital abandonment," she stated, her voice sharp and clear. "Mr. Croft, I see you were only retained this morning?" "That is correct, Your Honor." "We respectfully request a 30-day continuance to review the material." "Denied," Judge Evans said without looking up. "Your client allegedly abandoned his pregnant wife on a mountain pass during a storm last night. We are not delaying this." She looked at Sarah. "Counselor, you may proceed." Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, at 10 p.m. yesterday, Ethan Sterling left his wife on a logging road near Snoqualmie Pass, miles from help, during a torrential downpour. We have a recording of the incident." She played it. Ethan's voice, cold and cruel, filled the courtroom. "You're so dramatic, Ava. Maybe a long walk in the rain will clear your head." Ethan's face went white. His lawyer was hissing in his ear, but Ethan just sat there, completely paralyzed. Furthermore, Sarah continued, "Mr. Sterling has been systematically liquidating and hiding marital assets. We have traced offshore accounts holding over $15 million, in addition to the $7.2 million fraudulent wire transfer." "Objection!" Croft shouted, jumping to his feet. "These are wild, unsubstantiated claims." "Then allow me to substantiate them," Sarah replied calmly, placing a heavy binder on the witness stand. "Exhibits A through G, Your Honor. Transfers to ghost corporations, all authorized by Mr. Sterling without his wife's consent or knowledge." Judge Evans began turning the pages, her expression growing colder with each one. "Mr. Sterling, did you or did you not abandon your wife last night?" the judge demanded, and Ethan slowly stood. "Your Honor, we had an argument, a disagreement, that's all. It's a simple yes or false question. Yes, I left her there, but she could have called an Uber. She wasn't in any real danger." The judge just glared at him. "How thoughtful of you." She turned back to Sarah. "Please continue with your presentation." Sarah then displayed bank records on the main screen. Mr. Sterling was also funding an affair with a junior partner at his firm, Clara Hayes, using company accounts for extravagant trips and gifts, including a $75,000 watch, which he later reported as stolen to commit insurance fraud, when it was actually a gift to Ms. Hayes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Ben. "They're here." The massive doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. An agent from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division walked in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound, and for the first time, I saw true animal fear in his eyes. "Your Honor," the lead agent said, addressing the judge, "my apologies for the intrusion. We have a federal warrant for the arrest of Ethan Sterling on charges of wire fraud and securities fraud." Croft was on his feet again. "This is a procedural nightmare, Your Honor. An ambush. So is stealing millions from your investors," Judge Evans retorted. She gestured to the agents. "Gentlemen, please wait by the door until this hearing is concluded. Mr. Sterling is not going anywhere." Ethan collapsed into his chair. His phone, on the table beside him, started lighting up again and again. I could see the names on the screen: his father, his business partner, and repeatedly, Clara. "Based on the evidence presented," Judge Evans announced, "I am granting the motion in full. All marital assets are hereby frozen. Ms. Sterling is granted exclusive use of the family home and temporary support of $20,000 per month." "20,000?" Ethan yelled, shooting to his feet. "That's absurd. She has her own money." "Mr. Sterling," the judge's voice was like ice, "you abandoned your pregnant wife on a mountain after defrauding your clients of millions. You should feel fortunate I am not holding you in contempt of court right now." Ethan fell back into his chair, defeated. At that moment, my own phone started ringing. It was Clara. I sent her to voicemail. She called back immediately. And again. Sarah leaned in close. "Screenshot your call log," she whispered. I did. It was a digital testament to his implosion. 16 missed calls from Clara, 40 from Ethan, a dozen from his parents, and a wave of unknown numbers, investors, I assumed, who were just hearing the news. The FBI agent approached our table quietly. "Miss Sterling, we're going to need your full cooperation. Your lawyer indicated you kept meticulous records." I nodded, my hands steady. "Years worth of documents, emails, everything. It's all backed up." "He's looking at 20 to 25 years if the charges stick," the agent said, just loudly enough for Ethan to overhear. That was the final straw. Ethan lunged up, pointing a shaking finger at me across the room. You did this. You set me up." Judge Evans' gavel slammed down like a gunshot. "Mr. Sterling, one more outburst, and you will spend the night in a cell." Ethan completely lost it. The drive, the bank transfers, you found it all. So you are admitting you abandoned her? The judge cut in, her voice sharp. His lawyer tried to grab his arm, but it was too late. Ethan had just confessed in a federal courtroom. As the hearing concluded, the courtroom doors burst open, and Clara Hayes ran in, her hair a mess. She pointed right at Ethan. "You told me you were single," she screamed. "You said your divorce was already finalized. You told me she was unhinged and obsessed." The judge slowly rubbed his temples. "Ma'am, you are not a party to these proceedings," but Clara wouldn't be silenced. She held up her phone. "I have his texts. I have the wire confirmations. He told me we were building a life together. He said that money was his performance bonus." My lawyer's eyes lit up. She approached Clara with a calm, inviting smile. "Ma'am, I think my client and I would be very interested to hear what you have to say." Ethan's entire universe collapsed in that one moment. His mistress was about to be our key witness. His bank accounts were frozen, and his reputation as a brilliant Seattle innovator was utterly destroyed in under an hour. As we were leaving, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Catherine, Ethan's mother. "I hope you're happy. Tearing down a good man's life just because you felt a little neglected." I didn't even bother to type a response. Catherine would soon learn her good man was a thief who had finally been caught. I didn't tear him down. His own monstrous greed did that for him. Outside, the courthouse steps were a chaotic swarm of reporters. Someone from inside must have tipped off the press, probably a clerk who knew Ethan's name from the business journals. Microphones were thrust in my face, but Sarah kept a steady hand on my back, steering me through the chaos. "Mrs. Sterling, can you confirm your husband committed investment fraud?" "Ava, what does this mean for his firm? Are you seeking a divorce?" Sarah stopped them with a voice that cut through the noise. "My client has no comment at this time. This is now a federal investigation." We finally reached Ben's car just as a news van pulled up to the curb. By 6 o'clock, Ethan's mugshot would be broadcast all over the Pacific Northwest. The wonderkind of the Seattle tech scene, arrested for fraud. I imagined Catherine watching the evening news, absolutely horrified. Back at the hotel suite, I sank into the plush sofa, while Sarah poured 2 tall glasses of water. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since we left the courthouse. I scrolled through an endless stream of messages, some shocked, but most were overwhelmingly supportive. A text from my old college roommate. "Just saw the news. You go, girl. Take him for everything." From Marcus, Julian S. business partner, "Diana, this is a misunderstanding, right? Julian would never do this." Then 4 texts from our friends, each one basically saying, "We always thought that guy was too good to be true." But the most important text was from Julian's former assistant. "Diana, call me. There are things about the project funds you need to know. Things the police haven't found yet." My lawyer, Alex, read it over my shoulder. "Set up a meeting. And you need to record the entire conversation." At 4 p.m., a major design blog officially broke the story. The headline was everywhere. "Star architect arrested for fraud. Allegedly abandoned pregnant wife." And there was his photo. He looked drained, his perfect hair a mess. His designer suit replaced by a cheap, wrinkled polo shirt. A reporter was doing a live segment from outside our condo, my condo, detailing the whole awful scandal. Sources claim Julian Croft left his wife stranded after last night as charity gala, miles from their home. This morning, he was arrested on charges of embezzling $6.2 million from his firm's latest project. His wife, Diana Croft, has not made a statement. My phone buzzed. It was my sister, Jennifer. This time, I answered. "Diana, please, you have to let me explain everything. You told him about Dad's inheritance, didn't you? About Mom's portfolio. You told him everything." There was a heavy silence on the line. Then, her voice broke. "He said he was trying to help. He said you were too stressed with the pregnancy to manage it and he wanted to lift that weight off you. He even paid off your art school loans. I had no idea where that money came from. I thought he loved you. He told me you were emotionally overwhelmed and needed his protection. I thought of all the casual calls from Jennifer over the last year. How's the estate settlement going? Did Mom's jewelry collection get appraised? Are you going to invest any of that money?" Each question was a secret fact-finding mission for Julian. "He used you, Jen," I said quietly, "the same way he used everybody else." "Diana, I am so sorry." When I saw the news alert, my heart just stopped. "Please, can we just talk?" Alex was shaking her head no, but I could hear the real pain in my sister's voice. She wasn't just scared, she was shattered. "Tomorrow, meet me for coffee. And come by yourself." After I hung up, Ben opened his tablet. "You need to see this." Julian's company website was a complete dumpster fire. Furious investors were demanding answers. Former employees were sharing horror stories about his toxic behavior and shady billing. One comment read, "He fired me for questioning his expense reports last quarter. And now I see why." But the real mess was happening online, where his mistress, Sophie, had gone on the offensive. She was posting screenshots of their texts, photos from lavish getaways paid for with company money, and a long, dramatic post about how Julian had lied to her. He told me his wife was emotionally fragile, she wrote. He said she was using the baby to trap him and would destroy his career if he left. I believed his lies because he was so charismatic. I was an idiot, but he is a master manipulator. The pictures were devastating. Julian and Sophie drinking champagne on a yacht. Julian and Sophie at the same luxury resort in Aspen where we spent our anniversary. And a picture of Julian and Sophie inside our home. She actually posted it before the site's moderators could remove it. By 6 p.m., Julian's mother, Catherine, had her publicist release an official statement. Alex read it from her phone, trying to hide a smirk. The Croft family is shocked by these baseless claims. We believe this is a coordinated, vindictive attack by a disgruntled spouse looking for a lucrative divorce settlement. Julian Croft is a respected artist who has been victimized by a woman who married him for his name. Is she for real? Ben muttered. After what we just saw, my phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Ignoring Alex's glare, I answered. Mrs. Croft? My name is David Chen from the Chicago Tribune. We're investigating a pattern of fraud in the luxury real estate world. Your husband's case seems to be a key part of the puzzle. Would you be willing to share your side of the story? Alex immediately took the phone from my hand. This is Diana Croft's legal counsel. Please direct all future calls to my office. She ended the call and looked at me, her expression serious. Tomorrow, this story is going to be everywhere. Julian didn't just wreck his own life. He might take down an entire network of his corrupt associates with him. The FBI is just getting started. I walked to the window and stared out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in a jail cell, Julian was probably in a room with his lawyers, desperately trying to figure out how to spin this catastrophe. But you can't spin bank statements, a scorned mistress with photo proof, and millions of dollars that have just disappeared. My phone lit up again. It was a message from Marcus Vance, Julian's biggest investor. Mrs. Croft, I want you to know a group of us are filing a civil suit against your husband. Must be clear, you are not being targeted. We know you are as much a victim as we are. In fact, we were hoping you'd consider testifying for us. The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. For years, Julian had told me I was too naive to understand his work, too emotional for the world of high-stakes architecture. And now, the powerful men he'd cheated were asking for my help to bury him. As the city lights began to sparkle, I knew this was only the start of Julian's long, public downfall. Tomorrow would bring more headlines, more secrets, and more victims sharing their stories. But tonight, for the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I wasn't listening for his key in the lock, or bracing for one of his moods, or cringing from his words designed to make me feel worthless. The man who left me in the dark created his own black hole, and now it was swallowing him whole. The next morning, a firm knock on my hotel room door woke me from a deep sleep. Looking through the peephole, I saw Jennifer, a total disaster. Her hands trembled as she clutched a thick envelope, her face blotchy and swollen from crying. I opened the door but stood in the doorway, blocking her path. I couldn't wait until our meeting, she begged. Diana, please. You have to see this before I talk to the investigators this afternoon. My friend Victor moved to stand behind me, his presence a silent show of support. I gave him a small nod. It was fine. I let Jennifer in, and she collapsed onto the armchair, putting the envelope on the table as if it were a bomb. About a year ago, Julian called me, she began, her voice barely a whisper. He knew about my debt. I don't know how, but he knew I owed over $50,000 to a loan shark. He said he would pay it off, no strings attached, if I just helped him understand our family's financial situation. And you said yes, stated, my voice completely empty of warmth. I was terrified. They were going to come to my work, Diana. They were going to ruin my career. Julian made it sound so noble. He said you were too proud to ask for help, and he wanted to surprise you by solving your money problems. She fumbled with the clasp on the envelope, pulling out a stack of printed emails. This is everything, every single conversation we had. I printed them all last night after I saw the news. I took the top page. It was an email from Julian from 14 months ago. His words were so caring, so brotherly. He claimed he just wanted to understand our family dynamics so he could be a better, more supportive husband. The whole thing was a masterclass in manipulation. He was obsessed with Mom, Jennifer choked out. Her health, her mental state, her portfolio. I thought he was planning a surprise for her, like getting her a better nurse. You told him she had dementia. Jennifer just nodded, tears streaming down her face. She told me not to tell you, said she didn't want you to worry, that you had enough on your plate with the baby coming. But he was so convincing, so charming. He said he saw signs of cognitive decline and just wanted to help her manage things. I kept scrolling. The chat logs showed Julian's questions getting more specific. What properties did our parents still own? Were there any trusts? Who was the executor of their wills? My sister answered everything, thinking she was helping her brother-in-law protect our family. Last month, he asked her to get Mom to sign some papers, saying they were for insurance to protect her assets. My sister actually brought them to her, Diana. Luckily, Mom's wealth manager was there and realized they were asset transfer agreements. When my sister knew something was deeply wrong. My phone rang. It was Ben, my PI. I put him on speaker so Alex could hear. Mrs. Croft, sorry to call so late, but this is major. I've been digging into Julian's client list. He wasn't just skimming from the company. He was systematically targeting his elderly clients, especially recent widows. What do you mean targeting? Take Eleanor Hartley. Her husband passed 2 years ago, left her a fortune, and personally asked Julian to manage the estate. 6 months later, Marcus had her sign over power of attorney. She thought it was for managing her charitable trust. He used it to empty her accounts. I felt sick to my stomach. Eleanor Vance was 82. I knew her from charity galas, a sharp, kind woman who always bragged about her grandkids. How much did he steal? Just over $900,000. But that's not it. He made her think she was losing her mind, that she'd approved the transfers and forgotten. He gaslit an old woman into believing she had Alzheimer's. Leo was already typing, documenting every last detail for the police. This changed everything. Marcus wasn't just some greedy fraud. He was a monster, a predator who targeted the most vulnerable people he could find. I've got the digital records, Leo said. I found a hidden partition on the server a year ago. I started building a case, but I was terrified. Marcus knows powerful people. Now that he's in jail, I'm giving the FBI everything. After Leo was done, he opened one last password-protected folder on his screen. There's something else. It's about Dad's will. Our father passed away 5 years ago, leaving us what we thought was a pretty small inheritance. But the file on the screen told a very different story. It was a blind trust, set up in my name only, the year before Dad died. He knew I was a mess back then, Leo said, his voice low. He loved me, but he knew I was reckless with money, so he set this up for you, with Mom as the only trustee. It's worth nearly $3 million. Marcus found out about it, and he's been trying to break into it for the last 6 months. I just stared at the screen. $3 million hidden by my dad to protect it from my brother's bad habits, and from a husband he never trusted. The account was held at a private wealth firm on Newbury Street, one Marcus never would have found on his own. We have to go see Mom, Leo said. Now, she has something for you, something she wouldn't even tell me about over the phone. She just said she was waiting until you were ready. An hour later, we were in our mother's room at the memory care home. It was a good day for her. Her eyes were bright and clear as she took my hand. I knew what he was from the start, she said. Her voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. The way he looked at our art like he was pricing it for auction. How every single conversation always ended up being about money. Your father saw it too. She reached into a bedside drawer and took out a worn, leather-bound journal. Your father's. He started this the week after you were engaged. He put everything in here. Notes, suspicions, proof. Proof of what, Mom? Marcus tried forging my signature on some investment documents last year. Your father's old partner from the firm is still on the board. He called me right away and sent me copies of the forgeries. It's all in the journal. I took the book, its weight feeling heavy in my hands. My father was protecting me, even after he was gone, and my mother, through the fog of her illness, had been protecting his legacy. There's more, she whispered, her grip tightening on my arm. The FBI came to see me yesterday. It wasn't just about Marcus's arrest. It's much bigger than that. They told her his name was part of a huge, multi-year investigation, a whole network of financial advisors running a Ponzi scheme targeting their wealthiest clients. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. Marcus didn't abandon me on the street because he was cruel. He did it because he knew federal agents were about to knock on his door. He wanted me broken and scared, the perfect shield or the perfect person to blame when his empire finally collapsed. He never thought you'd fight back, my mother said, a small smile playing on her lips. Men like him never do. They always think a woman's kindness is just another weakness. And they are always shocked when they find out they are wrong. As we got ready to go, my mother squeezed my hand one last time. Your father would be so proud of you, Ava. You have a strength Marcus couldn't even begin to imagine. Driving away from the home, with Leo sitting beside me, I thought about the tangled web of lies Marcus had spun. Each new revelation showed the real depth of his sickness. He wasn't just a cheating husband or a crooked advisor. He was a spider at the center of a web that had drained the fortunes of dozens of families. But he made one fatal mistake. He thought the woman he left standing in the rain would simply stand there and let herself drown. Instead, she had become the storm that was about to tear down everything he had built on other people's pain. The firm on Newbury Street was a bastion of old Boston money and quiet discretion. Leo waited in the car as our lawyer and I went inside. The private banker, Mr. Abernathy, had known my father for decades. He greeted us with a solemn respect, as if he knew he was handing over something more than just files. We sat in a private room as he brought out the documents, forged loan papers with my signature on them, dated only 6 months ago. Real estate deeds for my family's summer home, which Marcus had clearly tried to mortgage behind my back. It wasn't just bank records, but a ghost server my brother Leo found hidden on our network. He's a digital forensics expert, and he broke into folders named after famous art forgeries, Marcus's sick little joke. Leo found it all. A note in a file for a fake power of attorney even had a password hint. She's too stupid to ever find this. Ben, my investigator, took photos of every document while I just sat there, feeling completely numb. Marcus's betrayal was so much deeper than an affair. This wasn't just about a failed marriage or stolen funds. He was trying to erase my entire financial existence, to make me utterly dependent, or worse, frame me for his crimes. Months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for day 1 of Marcus Thorne's criminal trial. The media frenzy had exploded since his arrest. News crews were camped out on the steps. Reporters shouted questions I ignored. I wore a dark gray suit, custom-tailored for this very moment. It was sharp, powerful, and expensive enough to make it clear that I was no one's victim. Marcus was at the defense table, drowning in a suit that was now 2 sizes too big. He had lost weight behind bars, and his normally perfect hair was a wreck. When he looked at me, I gave him a small, knowing smile. It was the same calm smile I used to give him at breakfast when he'd lecture me about my so-called shopping problem. But this smile held the weight of all his lies and the future he was about to lose. The prosecutor, a sharp attorney named David Chen, laid out the entire case. 15 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of elder financial abuse, and 1 count of racketeering. The evidence was a mountain. Falsified account books, hidden offshore companies, forged signatures, and even recorded calls of Marcus laughing about how easy his clients were to fool. For 11 days, witness after witness took the stand. Elderly investors explained how Marcus had charmed them into handing over their entire nest eggs. Former employees detailed how they were forced to create fake client statements. A forensic accountant drew a map for the jury, showing the complex maze of shell corporations Marcus created. Then, on the 12th day, the courtroom doors swung open and Chloe Vance walked in. She looked nothing like the glamorous woman who once wore my grandmother's diamond necklace on Instagram. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced with a simple black dress, her hair tied back. She'd been given total immunity for her testimony, and she looked like she was ready to light a match and watch Marcus's whole world burn. "Miss Vance," the prosecutor began, "how long were you in a relationship with the defendant?" 2 years, she replied, her voice steady and loud. "And in that time, did Mr. Thorne ever talk about his business dealings with you?" "Yes, constantly. He called it his art. He loved to brag about moving money through accounts without a trace. He said he was playing 3-dimensional chess while everyone else was playing checkers." She had phone recordings of Marcus bragging about targeting older clients, about hiding assets from me, and his detailed plan to flee to a country with no extradition treaty. In one recording, his voice was cold and clear, saying, "Ava is the perfect alibi, so naive, so trusting. She never looks at the statements. By the time she notices anything, I'll be on a beach in Bali, and she'll be the one left to answer for everything." But Chloe's biggest revelation came at the very end of her testimony. 3 weeks before his arrest, Marcus told me he was leaving me, too. He had a new woman lined up in Singapore, a tech heiress he'd met. He planned to empty my bank account the same way he planned to empty his wife's. The look on Marcus's face was worth every ounce of pain he'd caused. His mouth just hung open. His lawyer was whispering furiously in his ear, but the damage was done. His own mistress had just testified that he was playing everyone. The next day, another witness was called to the stand, a young man named Ryan Carter, 22 years old. He had Marcus's same dark eyes and arrogant posture. The prosecutor got right to the point. Model. He was Julian's son from a one-night stand in college, a secret he'd kept for 20 years. Leo testified, "My mother received $3,000 a month from Julian Croft for 2 decades just to stay silent. She kept every single bank statement. The payments came directly from his venture capital fund. I saw Julian just sink in his chair, all the air going out of him." Leo continued, "He told my mom that if she ever came forward, he would destroy her career and make her unemployable. She has the email to prove it." Then the prosecutor displayed 20 years of bank transfers, all funneled from the same accounts Julian used to defraud his investors. He wasn't just embezzling millions to fund his modern art habit, he was buying silence. Julian's lawyer jumped up, screaming it was a character assassination, but Judge Davies shut him down cold. She said it pointed to a lifetime of deception and financial abuse. On the final day, Julian made the fatal mistake of taking the stand. He ignored his lawyer's panicked expression and strode into the boxes, believing charm could fix anything. For 2 hours, he spun this wild story where he was the innocent one. He claimed I knew about all his cheating and looked the other way for the lifestyle. He swore his venture capital partners greenlit every risky investment. He was a genius, you see, who just made a few small accounting errors. But the cross-examination started, and his entire story just fell apart. When they showed him the hidden financial records, he called them forgeries. When they presented the falsified quarterly reports, he actually suggested I might have created them to set him up. And when asked about paying Leo's mother, he snapped that was a private issue, completely separate from my work. The jury was only out for an hour. As the foreman stood to read the verdict, I gripped my brother David's hand and my lawyer Maria's. On count 1, conspiracy to commit fraud, the jury finds the defendant guilty. On count 2, money laundering, the jury finds the defendant guilty. By the time she got to count 10, Julian's head was in his hands. Guilty. On everything. The man who called me crazy for asking questions was now facing the truth. We came back for sentencing 2 weeks later. Judge Davies, who had watched this whole charade, looked down at Julian with absolute disgust. Mr. Croft, you didn't just steal from portfolios. You shattered people's futures. You betrayed everyone who trusted you, your partners, your clients, and your own family. You've shown no remorse and taken no accountability for this mountain of evidence. This court sentences you to 10 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole, a full decade. Julian was being sent away. As the marshals approached with the handcuffs, his eyes found mine. He mouthed the words, "It's not over." I stood up, making sure my voice was loud enough for the court record. You're right. The lawsuits from your victims start next week. They cuffed him and let him out, and I stepped out of that courtroom into an afternoon so bright it felt like the first day of my new life. The investor lawsuits were just beginning, but that was Maria's fight to lead. I had a different kind of company to build. The whistleblower reward came in 6 weeks after Julian was sentenced. Nearly $4 million for helping the government claw back the embezzled money. That, plus the divorce settlement and a small fund from my parents, was enough to turn my trauma into a mission. My friend Sam found the perfect spot, a former tech startup office in San Francisco's Mission District. It had 2 levels, plenty of private offices, a large common area, and critically, 3 discreet exits for clients needing to leave a dangerous situation safely and unseen. We closed on a Friday. By Monday, the Phoenix project had a home. Okay, we need a fortress, Sam said, walking through the empty space, already sketching on his tablet. Keycard doors, silent alarms, and a camera system designed for privacy, not surveillance. Maria arrived with stacks of secure servers and legal software. I've already got 3 forensic accountants from Silicon Valley offering to help pro bono, she said. Word's getting out about what we're building here. Maria even took a leave of absence from her firm to help me set up our own legal aid service. Everything has to be airtight, she warned, spreading the nonprofit paperwork on a desk. We'll be up against abusive husbands with teams of corporate lawyers. Every single form has to be perfect. Our first client came a month later. Her husband, a famous app developer, had moved all their money into anonymous crypto wallets and was threatening her with deportation. Maria started a blockchain trace. Sam called in a cybersecurity specialist. I just held her hand as she cried, thinking of my own breakdown the night Julian left. That week, Chloe appeared at our office, sober for a few months, holding a box of donuts. I need to help, she said quietly. I know what it feels like to be a pawn in someone else's game. To be so stuck you cause pain you never intended. Maybe I can help others see the red flags before it's too late. We gave her a volunteer desk, answering phones and sorting paperwork. But Chloe had a gift for reaching women in crisis. She understood the pattern of being controlled and isolated in a way our professional counselors couldn't. Half a year later, she was running our main peer support group, telling her own story of how Julian manipulated her and helping other women identify the same playbook. My mother came to visit one afternoon with Leo driving her. She sat in my office, staring at the wall of photos women who let us share their victories, smiling in front of new homes or holding diplomas with their children. Your dad would be so proud of this, she said softly, her finger tracing the photo of a mother who just got her nursing degree. He used to say the only answer to cruelty is to build something kind. Then she took an old envelope out of her bag. This came to the old house. I think it's for you. Inside was a clipping from the prison's internal newsletter. Julian had been selected to lead a seminar for other inmates on responsible entrepreneurship. Even behind bars, he was still trying to spin his narrative as a misunderstood visionary. The nerve was so incredible I almost had to laugh. About 7 months later, a surprising visitor showed up. Maya was in our waiting room, looking totally different from the tech designer in the news articles. Her power suits were gone, replaced by jeans and a sweater. There was a quiet confidence about her I didn't recognize. "I've been doing a lot of work on myself," she said, taking a seat. "I'm trying to figure out how I got involved with a man like Julian, why I looked past so many red flags, and why I allowed him to use me to hurt your family. I can't undo my part in it. But maybe I can stop other young women in tech from falling into the same trap." She started giving talks at university tech programs, warning students about powerful men who offer mentorship in exchange for loyalty. She was painfully honest about her own ambition, but also explained the careful, slow burn manipulation that made everything feel so exciting. "He had a way of making me feel like I was the smartest person he'd ever met," she told a group of engineering students. "Like we were partners. By the time I figured out I was just another asset he was managing, it felt too late to get out." A year into Julian's sentence, a letter from him came to the foundation. His handwriting was perfect, even on the thin prison stationery. It was just pages of venom, accusing me of planning his downfall from the very beginning. He rehashed every argument we ever had, twisting them into evidence of my grand conspiracy. His last line was, "I hope you learned what happens when you cross me." I had that letter professionally framed and mounted on the wall right beside my degree. When a client asks what it is, I always tell them the truth. Oh, I absolutely learned my lesson. I learned that when a person shows you their true colors, you believe them the first time. I learned that careful preparation and a lot of patience can bring down an empire built on lies. And I learned that the best revenge is not just surviving, but building a shelter for everyone else caught in the storm. 18 months later, I was in my office looking at a wall plastered with pictures and letters. The Phoenix Project had helped over 90 women find a path to safety. For some, it was a forensic accountant. For others, it was a total reset, a new city, a new job, a new life. They all arrive here the same way, shattered and convinced they're trapped. One of Julian's earliest investors, a woman he almost bankrupted, is now our biggest supporter. After we helped her win her lawsuit and recover her funds, she joined our board. "That man made me feel like I was an idiot," she said at our last fundraiser. "The team here helped me realize I was a survivor." Outside, a storm was sweeping in from the ocean, rain streaking down the windows. I thought about that first horrible night, feeling so alone and defeated, as Julian drove off convinced he'd already won. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about power, about staying in my place. But what he really taught me was that lies have an expiration date, every betrayal has a price, and the woman you abandon in a storm learns how to command the thunder. All his calculated cruelty became the fuel I used to fight for myself, and for everyone else he manipulated. The final lesson, the one Julian never saw coming, wasn't about weakness, it was about strength. He tried to leave me with nothing. Instead, he gave me a cause. If this story of epic karma resonates with you, do me a favor and hit that like button. My favorite moment was seeing his perfect, smug mugshot plastered all over the news. That mask of the untouchable real estate mogul finally stripped away forever. What was your favorite part of Chloe's revenge story? Drop a line in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more tale of justice being served.